This is Future Sense Now, where we explore the landscape and byways of our shared futures. Future Sense Now is brought to you by the Futures Forum. Stay tuned for a journey to the futures of women with host Dr. Claire Nelson.
Greetings and welcome to Future Sense Now, an online e-zine of the Futures Forum. I am Claire Nelson and I'm delighted to be your travel guide on this exploration of the future. It is March 2017 and we're celebrating Women's History Month with an exploration into the future history of women. Specifically, we want to look at the year 2030 and beyond. And why 2030? Because the world has agreed that that's a big pull year for global change. It is the year when we aim to achieve 17 Sustainable Development Goals, as according to the United Nations. And Sustainable Goal 5 says to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. And this has several targets from end all forms of discrimination to adopt and strengthen sound policies and enforceable legislation for gender equality. Now, I think my guest today, who is Wendy McGuinness from New Zealand, certainly would have something to say on that. She is the founder of the McGuinness Institute, which she started in 2004. She got to this space by starting out as a fellow chartered accountant, and from public and private sector management went into risk management, which obviously led her into thinking more about how the future might occur. And so in 2004, she started the Institute, and one of its major efforts is to think about the long-term future of New Zealand with Project 2058. And what is really nice about her work is she's doing a lot of work, especially with youth. So without further ado, I'd like to say welcome to Wendy McGuinness. Welcome, Wendy. How are you?
Very good, thank you, and thanks for this opportunity. I'm delighted to sort of learn from you guys. I think you're doing amazing things.
Well, I am delighted that you could join me all the way from New Zealand. And for folks who are listening, she is 18 hours away, I think, because I am now taping her at 7 p.m. Washington, D.C. time, and it's 1 p.m. the next day, Monday, of her time in New Zealand. So I just want to say the miracle of modern technology. We're here, and so things will go as they go, given we're working with technology. So when I want to begin with this idea of public policy and the future of public policy and the future of government, and kind of bring us back to January 2017 when women took to the streets in Washington, D.C. to sort of protest what they think or thought of as perhaps a backlash of the women's movement to date, and wanted to ensure that the gains that have been made, certainly in the public space, are not rolled back. Was there any sort of a camaraderie rather around this issue with the women of New Zealand, or was it like, oh, that would never happen here, so we're not going to worry about it? What was happening in New Zealand?
Well, we did actually have women did go to the streets in Wellington and Auckland, so it was definitely something that we saw as a global issue. I think that it could happen here. I don't think that any country in isolation would actually think that this is possible, but it turned out to be the case in the US, and Brexit definitely created a whole lot of division as well. It illustrated the changing world. Like, we have a new normal. That new normal will bring different impacts that we had not some expected and some unexpected.
So, in other words, it's still an open court as to what might occur. So, when you then think about the year 2030, 2058 is very far away from most of us. Certainly in that year, I will be 100 years old, and I would say I would love to be alive and lucid in 2058. And to be honest, I have the example of my best friend's mother, who just passed at 101, and she was lucid and talking sense. So, there is hope. But so if we look at 2030 as a sort of and I like the word you use, in one of your projects, you talk about nation dates. And so 2030 could be sort of a global nation date. And maybe we should start using that term, that sort of global nation days when things happen that make a shift. So like the 9/11 2001 was a sort of a global nation date for the world, and World War II was another global nation date, and the other things. So this is a global nation date in that we're saying together, 169 countries, we want to see women occupy this space. Do you, when you hear these terms about end all form of discrimination and equal access to land and technology, do you really think this is possible? It's plausible, but is it really something that could, if not being 100% there, that we really could be halfway there irreversibly by 2030?
I think that New Zealand is, we're very different from a lot of undeveloped countries in terms of where women's rights and their powers are. So in New Zealand, we are a very, we don't have anywhere near some of the challenges that are existing in other countries in the world at the moment in terms of women's rights and responsibilities, but we still do have issues and we still have challenges. And so New Zealand, for example, was the first country to give women the vote. We've had situations where we've had all the 5 top institutional structures in New Zealand be led by women over a 2-year period. So we have, I think, a very good relationship with men very generally in terms of sharing our knowledge and building relationship. But that doesn't mean to say that we haven't got work to do.
Okay.
So we're a little bit unusual, but that doesn't mean to say that we don't actually understand or have some empathy and want to actually support women in other parts of the world. And I think the UN goal is actually something that really resonates with women here as well.
So when we look at the SDGs and your work, because you're very much focused around public policy in your work, and I think in that regard, given so many things are being privatized in these countries, you really can't separate, for example, the issue of water as a public right and then the role of the private sector, or let's say healthcare as something the government ought to be providing the public sector. So as you think about then in the case of New Zealand and how your example on the work you're doing could be an exemplar for other small countries, and you look at the issue of women equal rights around access to ownership and financial services and natural resources, how do you think New Zealand might become an exemplar in this space in terms of women's rights and women's access to these things?
I'm a great believer in that we must be a role model. So I don't like the word leadership. I actually think that we must do what we think we want our children to do.
Okay, I think I'm missing that word. It's not coming through clearly. Could you speak into the mic a little bit more for me, please?
Okay, great. So I'm a great believer in that we should be role models.
So
I don't like the word leadership. I think leadership is almost is a parent-child kind of language.
So give me the word again, because I want to make sure I hear it. Could you spell it for me?
A role model. So ROLE, and then model MODEL.
Oh, role models. So how is role models different from leadership in women's case, in the issue of women taking up, let's say, space in public sector management? Let's call the word management.
Okay. It doesn't mean, it means that, for me personally, it means like being a facilitator, someone that tries to bring diversity together. And I mean diversity in the broad sense of terms of, age group and experience and skills and genders. So the magic that happens when we bring diversity together. So I see it almost as the work that we do as like a scientific experiment, that we try and develop a cohesive society and an informed society through actively pursuing ways to bring people together to have a highlighted experience of understanding the country.
Okay, so we're going to say we're working towards cohesiveness, inclusiveness, and so in the face of diversity, and always maintaining this idea of perhaps looking at the world different from a us and them, vice
Yeah.
versa, and saying, okay, we want the woman's perspective to shape a role model format as opposed to say we have to be in charge.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm
so
very much a believer of relationships.
mhm.
So I think a relationship is very different from a partnership. So a partnership or an agreement takes people back to the signing of the agreement. And I'm actually
Hmm.
think that's a negative way. And whereas I think if we focus on building relationships, like Claire, you and I, we talk now, we talk in 6 months, we build a relationship where we know and trust and build on our knowledge and skills together to make a better world. So I have a very different perspective. In some
Ah,
ways, I think agreements and contracts are quite a male way of thinking. It's about, preventing the risk of something going wrong, whereas I think relationships are a very, in many ways, on the female side, a more sensitive way of
wow.
actually.
I had never thought about the words in that context. That and let me see if I get this right, because it's very important as we try to construct a new paradigm. Because part of what is going to be required for us to survive and thrive is a new paradigm. So you're saying even the word partnership is loaded or preloaded with a concept of um, that this idea of win-win, or we partner because we don't want to have a win-lose, and
Yeah,
we're focused on an end goal, which is a specific date.
yeah, yeah.
And you're saying you would like to see women become role models and create relationships that allow diverse groups to be included at the table of decision making in order to create a cohesive society. Am I kind of paraphrasing this?
No, you're doing perfect. You're doing perfect, and it's actually a great way to live one's life because it's not putting you in a box. It actually enables you to see the world as a wonderfully interesting, exciting group of people.
Okay. I want to make sure but can you repeat that because your voice kind of faded out at the end.
Sorry. So for me, it's a real opportunity to see the world as an exciting, interesting place where
Uh-huh.
you build and learn relationships. So that actually it's a very organic, systemized kind of way of operating instead of actually being thinking of it in a very staged, process-driven way. I think women are particularly good at this, and this is actually why men like them on boards and things because they break down barriers that are
Hmm.
intrinsically within the old frameworks.
So now in your 20, I want to talk about two things in the time we have. Probably let's talk about 2058 first and then go to the youth because they are going to be the ones who are going to be driving things. So in 2058. So in the project 2058, which is actually good because I think sometimes we tend to behave as if at 2030 we're going to come to a hard stop, and then we have to start over again. So I like the fact that you are actually working on Project 2058, which I presume is an important nation date because why?
We started the actual work of the Institute in 2004. And in 2008, I actually went to Washington, D.C. to my first Futures conference. And when I was there, I was invited to a dinner that night, and there was about maybe 15 people around the table,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a discussion question, and the discussion question was what countries, basically the world was stuffed, what countries would showcase or be an exemplar for us going forward. And of course, and I was very quiet because I was just learning this new language, moving from risk management into futures. And of course, the fifth country was New Zealand. And being probably human behavior, I had a nice little smile on my face when I went to sleep that night, thinking, oh, this is great. And I got 18,000 feet about 12 hours later on my trip home to New Zealand, and I suddenly realized, oh my gosh, if that's 20% of the future world's progress is dependent on New Zealand,
Mm.
being amazing. And I didn't think we were there yet. So
Mm.
Project 2058 came out of 2008, Washington,
Ah.
D.C., that conversation.
I assume it was probably going to be the 100th year of your anniversary of independence from Great Britain or something like that. Nothing like that.
Well, I had to make a plan, so I made my plan on the second half of my trip on that, because it's a long way back from Washington DC, and so from that I said I'm not putting my foot on New Zealand soil till I had a plan, and that
Wow.
plan, Project 2058.
Wow. So when people in New Zealand hear the date 2058, what do they think about that particular date, and why has it resonated where people are actually beginning to think about?
Okay. So I was actually an accountant, and when I first started accounting, one of the first things I learned was, you would go out 3 years in advance and you would look back at the last 3 years and do your budget, so forth. And then I sort of realized actually things were changing, and going to particularly change very quickly, that actually that model would no longer work. So,
Exactly.
yeah, so as an accountant, I actually then took on this idea that it was better to choose one date in advance, long enough away, but so that you didn't hold it too closely to you, but far enough that it actually gave you some traction. And the idea is that 2058 stays the same. So when we're in 2057, it will still be 2058. And
But the question I'm curious about is because in the work you're doing, let's say with our generation, we're going to be 100 years or older in 2058, and if the transhumanists have their way, we'll have downloaded our brains into some various version of an android, so we'll still be around in our metal buckets. um, um, how is it resonating, let's say, with the teenagers and the young people you've been working with? Because I know you've been doing some work with youth and the future of New Zealand. How are they seeing this issue about the future of New Zealand and the future of gender relationships and gender power, or engendered power as well?
Well, interesting. We just did this is my little advert. We just did this workshop in April where young people created a pack of cards to play.
So we put it closer so we can see it.
Yeah, I'll just put it so you can see. So that's the game, and these are the packs.
It's a game. Oh.
Game. And so this is the pack here, and so you can see. So the idea, they actually created 3 games out of this, so you can actually do scenarios on New Zealand's future. But one of the interesting things that this workshop, it's such a wonderful opportunity because you learn so much. But so one of the things was they talked about the post-gender society with me. So it was very interesting, post-gender. So in other words, it's not about female, it's not about male. They were saying, when birth certificates do not require a gender. So male or female, which is, quite challenging for, particularly some, New Zealanders, and actually understanding, and probably in the world, but just understanding this evolution that we're part of.
Because, so a post-gender, is it because you're saying by that time people will be able to choose their gender? People are doing that now, so that gender won't matter? Or is that they're saying roles will no longer be gendered, even if there are still... So in other words, like now, nurses tend to be female and a few odd males. And then, let's say... there are other jobs which tend to be gendered, they're usually men or women. Let's say engineering tend to be still men. I mean, are they saying that at that point it will absolutely make no difference what your gender is with jobs, in terms of gender roles in the workplace and even in the home? What are the young people thinking?
Well, my perspective is it's about respect. It's about respect to be and who they want to be. It is actually about taking away those judgments. It's cool, eh?
Well, I have the same because okay. So then, when you listen to that perspective of the younger people who are, let's say, emerging into this new paradigm of government and governance, because again, government and governance are 2 different things. There is government, and governance is everybody else who supports the role of governing, right? How do you then think in New Zealand, how many people, first of all, is your population?
We talk about 5 million, but we have 1 million of those are overseas. So we kind of, piggyback off the fact that we're good travellers.
Okay, so you're a pretty small country and a pretty significant land space, right? So that's not, you're really underpopulated to some extent. So when you
Yeah.
think about that fact, think about where you're placed geographically, think about the geospatial relationships, to your west and to your north in Asia, right? And the numbers of people who are migrating in search of a better life, etc. um, I don't know how much immigration you have right now to New Zealand, but do you think, for example, if in the next 15 years you have more immigration from, let's say, Muslim countries or from Hindus and Buddhists, that this whole notion of, let's say, gendered roles, in other words, they will assimilate in a way to follow the New Zealand way? Do you think that your society is sufficiently, let's say, uh, I don't know what the word would be, but in other words, that your society kind of almost, I would say, you remain your diverse self, but you sort of tend to follow along what the mainstream is. Is New Zealand sort of like that?
Well, I think that where we have a strong Maori culture here, obviously, they're our First Nation people, and they, as a culture, have sort of embedded their culture within, if you like, the Pākehā, which is the terminology we mean for European here that have been here for a long period of time. So we're not new people or different cultures and traditions are attractive to us. We find them interesting. I'm being very general here.
Yes.
Obviously, the tension, but I think there is, particularly from our young people, like to embrace those differences. We love traveling. We love the world. So we love the diversity. We're very into coffees and good food, and so we're very into that kind of way. So
I
so
have to
that's
come to
a
New
that's
Zealand and cook some Jamaican food.
oh,
Invite me to New Zealand so I can come and cook some Jamaican food and sing some reggae music. And you can Jamaican futures. So as we think about this future though, and this idea of, okay, so women's roles, you're saying it will be different, it will be gendered differently because gender might become more neutral, and you want to use the word relationship and not partnership. And I come back to this notion of your institute that says why you're doing what you're doing is because you want New Zealand to be an exemplar. And so I want to look at the issue of sustainability now, because you're sort of an island, you're a big enough island to be almost, but still you're an island. But people don't call you an island for some reason, but you really are an island. Now, in terms of the island nations, which are really small and fragile, how are, let's say, the way of women's thinking styles and this relationship style of leading, would say, how is that changing the natural resource management paradigm and the environmental paradigms that New Zealand is using? And how can this be, let's say, spread across to other island nations that are struggling really to remain afloat in the sea, literally?
yeah. We definitely, I wouldn't want to give the impression that we don't have tension. We have a lot of tension at the moment around fresh waters, in that allowing people to swim in the streams, because we have a very strong agriculture-based economy that lobbies very strongly, and of course pollutes the water that people want to swim in or want to fish in. So there's definitely tension that exists there. Whether my view is that if you like, the environmental perspective will succeed, just largely because Kiwis don't like dirty water. But so there's a narrative there in terms of New Zealanders are largely, everyone that's come to New Zealand has come from a pioneer perspective, wanting to create a new New Zealand. So the word "new" is interesting in itself.
Ah.
So yeah, and there's a real utopia. Like one of our prime ministers wrote a book in 1889 called Woman's Destiny, where he considered by the year 2000 that there would be all women that would leave New Zealand. So it's a really interesting. So there's kind of, there's kind of a really kind of nice stuff. It's actually a great book, and I've got it. It's very interesting. But understanding that there is, Newton's cradle, how it has the pendulum swinging. And everything has an impact on everything else. I kind of see that as almost the, male and female, and the children or the family or the parents in the middle. That when you look at futures of women, you need to understand futures of men, and we have to make space for that dialogue because they're so intertwined. You can't have one without the other. And even if you have all this, science coming down the line, at the end of the day, we want a cohesive society. We want, that diversity. We want progress. So it's really interesting to understand what will drive the future. And I suppose, going back to your comments about America, what's happening there, in terms of potential role models for young women is really concerning. That women are not seen. But you've also had some amazing, what I would call whistleblower women in the States that have actually put up and said, and boy, that, I think, wow, massive applaud to them. And I think that's what we need to be when I say we want to be the role model. We need to constantly stand up, and we need to support each other when you do. And probably the only other thing I would say is women's health. I think that's the other thing that we tend to give, and we need to make sure that we maintain both ourselves and our communities to make sure they're strong.
So as we talk about the word strong, you ended on strong then. I wanted to close off with this question about strength and power, actually political power, because at the end of the day, there's different ways to make changes, and sometimes you are not necessarily in the official, let's say, authoritative titular seat, but you still have power. How do you see then women's use of their power evolving and emerging to really bring us to a sustainable New Zealand that can serve as an exemplar in 2030?
I think that's a really good point. One of the problems for women is our bandwidth. So do you know what I mean by bandwidth? Our ability, we're so busy looking after our children, our parents, we're looking after people at work because they're crook, and our ability to focus on these other issues becomes much smaller. So I think that's something that I think that we can applaud ourselves for, but it is also gives us an inability sometimes to have the leverage that we could have. So for us to make change, we kind of have to accept that our bandwidth may be less than, if you like, men or other people in power. And therefore we have to be very strategic in how we use it. And also we almost have to accept that we can't use it all the time. Like there's times in my life where I've had to focus on someone, and which has made my bandwidth for my work very small. But there'll be times when my bandwidth is very big. So we don't beat ourselves up, but think very, very strategically.
Well, I think that's a very good thing to consider about strategic use of power, because again, to come back now to the United States as a sort of a role model for women's movements and democracies, period, and the fact that people have sort of decided that, well, we can't go back to an antiquated version of what being great looks like, because for us being great looks a different way, and so we want to define what great means in a different way. So as we think about strategic use of power and this idea then, the United Nations, to come back to the specific goals and targets, if you had to be optimistic or pessimistic or neutralistic, which is neutral, which one would you choose, and what headline would you want to share with us then for 2030?
I'm naturally a very optimistic person, but I'm very realistic. 13 years is not very far.
You're right.
in terms of change.
Yes.
But one of the strategic things is to understand that it is a very new world that we have, and Brexit is part of that new world, and also Russia and China. So I'm not just the US. All these threads or emerging trends have all happened at once, and at the moment we have, I think, sort of almost chaos, and we don't know where things are going to settle.
Mm-hmm.
When that happens strategically, you want to use that to your maximum, because it's an opportunity. While everything's up in the air, it's almost like work really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Try and make the most of this time.
Mm-hmm.
Work out. A lot of people haven't worked out their preferred future.
Mm-hmm.
So the more that we can work out what we want and actually work towards to create that space. I think of it often as being in a whirlwind and you're trying to create where you're going to land the plane.
Mm-hmm.
You know, actually that's where we are right now at this moment of time. And the people that are actually preparing the airstrip and getting the plane ready to land, they're probably going to have the most influence. So thinking strategically is working out exactly where we want to land. And it's often my view is, and why I started the think tank, is that actually no one else was going to do it the way that I felt it should be done, even though I looked for years for other, because I'm lazy. We're all a bit lazy. Wouldn't it be nice if someone does this for us? Well, it doesn't happen. So what you've got to do is actually say, okay, well, I'm going to make it happen.
Yes.
And I think that, you know, that's what we women do all the time. We do that when, you know, when school runs, we do it with in our communities. You know, it's a natural phenomenon. Almost forget about the leadership stuff. It's actually because it has to be done. And this is a time when stuff has to be done.
So I want to ask one last question, even that was my last question. So I know my final last question is on that note, because you said women, it just has to be done. As we think then about the Sustainable Development Goals, recognizing that 13 years is not a long time, but being optimistic, we want to at least see some advancement. What would you say could be our role as women futurists in particular, who have these skill sets as well as the skill set of intentionally thinking about the construction of the future? How might we better serve the different women's movements as well as the other movements, whether they be the energy movement, the, you know, biodiversity movement, in a way that is not now happening because we're not necessarily having many women futurists in these spaces operating as futurists? How might we as a network of women really say, okay, how might we organize differently to say, look, this is a call for action, and we can present ourselves as people who actually do this for a living all the time, think strategically about the future. How can we, what might you offer as a suggestion that we can begin to create new sort of relationships to support the change process?
Everyone will have a different answer to that question, but for me, I'm focusing on the 18 to 25-year-olds. The 18 to 25-year-olds. The 18 to 25-year-old.
Ah, okay, got you.
Because my view is that when I get them together, that they get hope. And it's not from me, it's from meeting other people of their tribe, and I use the word tribe, because they actually know that together they might be able to tilt the future.
Yes.
So I'm into giving them the skills and give them a blank canvas to be able to build their future. So I want them to connect, build those relationships. I want to give them the skills. So I think this is important conceptually, because what it's trying to do is saying, you don't know what cards you're going to be given when you dealt a pack, you know, some cards. You don't know what order they're going to be, but the quicker you can see the connections between the cards that might be dealt you, the better. So if you look at the moment globally, and, you know, you've got the, you know, our you know, governance, our governments, you know, they're as blind as the rest of us in terms of seeing the patterns and linkages between things. But the more that we can get people building that pace, getting faster and faster at seeing those linkages, the stronger our countries will be and the planet will be.
That is a fantastic message to end on. I want to thank you so much, Wendy McGuinness, for sharing your time with us. I certainly hope that I can, learn from what you're doing to be able to really help young people that I have influence over or choose to try to influence, even though they don't want me to influence them, to really see how we can really begin to construct the pathway to our own survival as a species. So, thank you. Any last words of wisdom?
Just make it happen.
Well, folks, when McGuinness has said, let's make it happen, I want to thank you for listening to another edition of Future Sense Now, the online e-zine of the Futures Forum, where we strive to bring you more diverse voices of those who are shaping our shared futures. Today's guest was Wendy McGuinness of the McGuinness Institute in New Zealand. And so as I leave you to ponder your own role and plans for construction of our future, I ask you to remember that the future is embedded in the landscape of our present and that we can all face our future with faith. Safe journeys.
You have been listening to Future Sense Now with Dr. Claire Nelson, brought to you by the Futures Forum. For more, please visit www.thefuturesforum.org. Thank you for listening. Spread the word. Share the future.